doesn't
fuck
fucking
it, give it a
compute.
try.
Oh, okay.
That's what you get from.
I'm gonna try to find the
Is
place.
this volume fine?
Mr. Scott and Gleeblee. Scott escaped from a local mental asylum. Ranchi and Sons Mental Asylum for the mentally mental. Gleeblee came from a magic cigarette Scott found in a 12-pack. Mr. Scott and Gleeblee. Now they're off to a show. A dinner date. They will be showing Monstrals Must Kill Again for the end of the world stories. I want to see it for myself. And so the boys go to the theatre, past a Swallowy Street. They find Swiss cheese on a conveniently placed table. It's all mine, said Gleeblee. And who would be the judge of that? Dinkler G. Wallowby, out of good time, but in the place to be. He examined the mass of dairy with his rotoscoped eyelids. Now the smell defined the cheese validity, as did the texture and the taste. So the inspector took a bite. Authentic. So the boys went to the showing. Quite a good time they had. Mr. Scott and Gleeblee. Mr. Scott and Gleeblee. Monstrals Must Kill Again for the end of the world stories. I want to go see it for myself. The gavel knocked down onto the pavement. I will be the judge of that. Local cheese inspector, Dinkler G. Wallowby, out of good time but in the place to be. And what a sight he did see indeed, of that of Scott and Gleeblee. The schizophrenic walked down the street. And who did he meet? But the one and only Gleeblee wants a tree of the cigarette variety. There was nothing else that could be said. He checked the cheese himself, made sure it was ripe for the picking, set it on the table, all as a ploy. He did not want to see the movie. He did not want to see Scotty. Oh, Scotty. Mr. Scott and Gleeblee. One was from a local mental asylum, the other from a back alleyway. To see the show Monstrals Must Kill Again for the end of the world stories. I want to see it for myself. Yet while they walk to the theater, they can't help but see, placed in front of a block of Swiss cheese. And so wondering if it was real or not, Gleeblee shouted that it was all of his, but it wasn't his cheese. And the judge of that Dinkler G. Wallowby, out of good time, but in the place to be. Certain if this cheese was real or not. It was him, of course. Who else but him? He's looked at its texture. Rotoscoped eyelids glinted in the cheese. The smell defined its validity. The texture, the taste, how it breathed and lived inside the mass of the world that it existed in. He took a bite of the cheese that was found on the table on the way to the movies. The movie Monstros Must Kill Again for the end of the world stories between Scott and Gleeblee. The schizophrenic and the cigarette variety. So the man, the judge, he took a bite, Mr. Dinkler G. Wallaby. Authentic. And so the boys went to the showing of Monstros Must Kill Again for the end of the world stories. And they had themselves quite a good time. Mr. Scott and Gleeblee. Cigarette burns brightly, and then it's gone. And the user is killed. Long gone. To call the relationship between the one Mr. Scott A. Pilgrim and Gleeblee G. Wallatree symbiotic would be a gross misinterpretation of the meaning of their plight. It did not matter that the one was killing the other, as the one inhaled the smoke which the other used to be alive and contribute to the mass of its being, whilst that very smoke was the thing that was killing them from the inside out. It did not matter, as in that moment of pure entropy, the two of them felt like the best course of action to be taken was to go see the movies Monstros Must Kill Again for the end of the world stories. And not only was it that, but as they approached, they saw the one and only Dinkler G. Wallaby out of good time, but in the place to be, checking out the cheese of the Swiss variety on the table past Soloway Street. So conveniently was placed the cheese.
Rotoscope guy.
He examined the cheese, the judge himself, his gavel dropped onto the ground, and his robe betrothed to the world that it did not belong to. Gleeblee calls bullshit, but he doesn't know any better. He is nothing more than a cigarette butt waiting to fall upon the ground in a cloud of smoke. And so Mr. Dinkler G. Wallaby, out of good time, but in the place to be, examined the mass of dairy with his rotoscoped eyelids, and his glass skin, and his green, almost bamboo-like hair. He picked up the cheese, examined the texture, examined every little bit of it. He saw the mold colonies that made their own universes upon that little brick of cheese, which in that entropy they belonged to Mr. Scott and Gleeblee, looking at the showing of Monstros Must Kill Again for the end of the world stories, only to be interrupted by that Dinkler G. Wallaby, who insisted that he would be the examiner of the cheese, right past Swallowy Street. And he looked on the table, so conveniently placed was that Swiss cheese. Who placed the Swiss cheese? Was it you or was it me? I don't know. But Dinkler G. Wallaby, out of good time, but in the place to be, picked it up with his bare, singular finger, examining the holes on the cheese to see if it was real or not. It was not real. He took a bite out of it, and immediately he fell to the ground. Scott and Gleeblee were shocked. Scott more than Gleeblee. Gleeblee laughed at him for a moment before he can go any further. Well, of course, Scott held Gleeblee in his hand. One-man band with a cigarette friend, Mr. Gleeblee. As Dinkler G. Wallaby sat there on the dull cement. He died. He could not see. The movie Monsters Must Kill Again for the End of the World Stories. He wanted to see it so badly. Tid wanted to see it. And as he took the final bite of the cheese, nor did he say authentic, yet he said, goodbye. No more world. No more cheese. No more Wallaby. No more Salowy Street. No more movie. No more Scott and Gleeblee.
In brief.
And just like that, the boys emerged from the theater. They were the only ones who showed.
Only ones.
They loved it. 5-star reviews, claps from everybody who was there. But it was only them, Scott and Gleeblee. Little did they know that outside in the projector room was none other than Dinkler G. Wallaby, out of good time, but in the place to be. They looked at the projector screen and it fell over like a slice of Swiss cheese. That's all it was. It was all one big metaphor that everything would mold and rot away. As per par for the schizophrenic and his cigarette pal Gleeblee, Mr. Scott and Gleeblee. Quite a good time they had at the movie. Monstros Must Kill Again for the End of the World Stories. And so, finally the boys went home, undeterred by Mr. Dinkler G. Wallaby, out of good time but in the place to be. They went back past Salowy Street, back to their home where they must have belonged. The pack was reopened, and Scott placed the magic cigarette back into its entropy where it belonged. And he checked back into his mental asylum, Ranchian Sons. Yet will they meet again, as the song replayed, as the wretched had to scratch, he knew, as the cycle had to endure itself, making the circle makes a revolution once more. Yes, it has to. It is destined to keep rolling like a block of cheese, slowly rotting away. Yet little did you know the cow will always make more. There will always be more blocks of cheese to be rolled down. It will never be enough. And so, Mr. Scott and Gleeblee, were they really going to see a movie? Monstros Must Kill Again for the End of the World Stories. Scott looked at Gleeblee. What would it matter?